We can start from the beginning. Maybe I'll say something more interesting.
Hold on. We're recording right now.
Let it roll.
We're recording. Okay, so everybody, we are here with my friend Ruhi, Zandra, Quinn. We had some technical difficulties earlier, and I had to start the broadcast all over again. But we're back.
Oh, yes.
So, anyways,
It's on.
so anyways, I've been knowing Ruhi since 1996. I met her through a women's film organization named Real Women at the Austin Access Station in Austin, Texas. And Ruhi has lived in many places, one of them being China. So we're going to go back and talk about how she lived in China and what she did. Okay, Ruhi, it's on you. Bam.
That was the best start to a show I've ever been a part of. Thank you so much. Yeah, we were very lucky to find each other. I guess we were both kind of starting out, and we found that it was called Austin Cable Access back in those days, or Austin Community Access. And yeah, there was just a bunch of cool people there that all wanted to make films. And we ended up working on some projects with all women crews, which was great, and all experience levels, you know. So it was a really good program. And I was an instructor there. Yeah, and Janine, she's an awesome human being and totally was like super curious about filmmaking and had already done some stuff and was like, this is it. We're going to make stuff. And when Janine makes a decision, it happens. That's kind of how she rolls. And so we ended up doing some work together on a volunteer orientation video for an old favorite in Austin called South by Southwest. Back then, it was just a film festival only, and now it's huge, right?
Right.
Multimedia, all kinds of stuff going on. But in 1996, my main goal was just really to get involved in production. And some of the same people I met in those days, I still am in touch with today, even though we have not worked together for decades. That's
Hmm.
how close knit and tight knit film production crews can be. It's like family. But then a friend of mine, her dream was to go live in China. And she just kept telling her mom, I gotta go, I gotta go. I just want to be there. And long story short, her mom was like, no way. You speak Spanish, like go to a Spanish speaking country if you want to live abroad. And she was like, no, I'm going to China. I'm learning Chinese and all this. And so she said, okay, you can go. She was just right out of college. I was a little older than her. Um, and our mothers knew each other and they introduced us. She said, okay, if Ruhi wants to go with you, then you can go. And that's how I got there. And I was just going to help her move. And then I ended up loving it. I ended up enjoying the culture. I ended up enjoying the language, the opportunities that were there. And I stayed. I stayed for 12 years in a city called Xi'an. And that first year was all about getting used to being a teacher because I got an opportunity to teach at, back then it was called the Xi'an Foreign Language University, and now it's called Xi'an International Studies University. And I was lucky enough to be a part of the continuing education department. And so that was all adults basically coming in. They're already professionals and they wanted to improve on their skill set. And so I got to create different workshops. Over the course of the year, I probably had over 800 students, adults from
Wow.
all over different provinces in China, north, south, east, west. Some were from the village schools, others were from cities. Um, and so it was just an incredible experience to meet so many people. And some of those folks were in continuing education because they did not have an opportunity to do that where they were from. So it
Hmm.
was just like they literally left, like went on sabbatical from teaching and spent that whole year just working on their and training themselves to take those next steps in their career, whether they were with, K through 12 students or college students in their hometown. So it was just a really awesome year. And then I was pulled back to Austin because I had the opportunity to work on Spy Kids 3D. And that just got my attention. It was a big deal back then. That's when 3D cameras were first coming out. And essentially, the folks that made the 3D camera for James Cameron to do his stuff were on set for that project. And I had never been in the camera department before. And I just made a case for myself. I went over there and I did the interview. And it was an all-male crew. And they were looking for somebody who could, take on these responsibilities at a very basic level, learn from a ground up kind of thing. And I went for it. And I'm still friends with those guys today and really grateful for that opportunity, to have been able to step on set when they were using new equipment, brand new, right out of the box. Nobody knew what was going to happen. And they even had the only person on the planet who knew how to run those cameras on set. So it was just very lucky experience. But then I was pulled back to China again because I love living overseas. Fast forward to 2023, and I was talking to my husband and I went, this is so interesting. Like, after all this time, I don't think I've lived in North America since 2001.
Yeah.
And you know this because we keep in touch by phone and all. And, as the technology advances, like, FaceTime, cell phones and all. So it was like, that's pretty incredible. And I know there's been a big shift in how things are in this part of the world. But I think that's one of the benefits. You and I were talking before, like how important it is to travel if you have that opportunity, and plan for that if you can, because your whole worldview starts to shift. Everything you think about and all your perceptions, who am I as a person, and then who are folks out there, right? Then you really begin to understand each other more, and you begin to build these bonds of friendship that are much larger than, what you might see on TV, and that seems like a little cliche, but it's the facts. Like, when you meet the people, you feel like, oh, okay, I get it now. I understand a lot more than I did before. And I can tell you, 12 years in China shifted my thinking to a more Eastern mindset, And then after China in 2013, we decided, okay, let's see where we're at. We're getting a little older. How's our family doing? Do our folks need anything, now that they're up in years? And we wanted to spend more time closer to family. So we sort of made that decision and to make a leap across the ocean there, but not all the way. Like, we ended up in Hawaii because we have my mother there and other family in Hawaii Island, and on Maui. And so it's really interesting that we had this opportunity to sort of like take that step right out of the Eastern culture into a Polynesian culture, right? Because Hawaii is actually part of the Pacific. It's part of, these whole island chains that includes everywhere from Tahiti to Tonga to the Solomon Islands to the Marshalls to Australia, right? So there's this whole oceanic continent, if you will, that allows folks to experience life in a completely different way than, say, for example, living in a country in Asia. So those are the backdrops. The last few years of my life had been in very collective environments, because Asian cultures are very collective and Polynesian cultures also have that. And it's rooted in group efforts and family. And there's a lot of focus on what we do together, as opposed to a Western mindset, which is much more individual. Yeah. From maybe you remember this from growing up, like, it's like, as soon as you're the one that has your hand up in the class, right? It's like, ooh, I got the question. I got the answer. Whatever the conversation is, it's like you start to get praise from a very young age, when you stand out independently. And then it kind of like grows and grows and grows, right? As you get into your professional career. right? You're supposed to try to stick out a bit, right?
Mhm.
Where in collective cultures, it's okay to stick out a teeny bit, but not that much. You don't want to
Mhm.
like be too proud. You want to be a little bit more humble, and it's different everywhere you go. These are just generalizations, but
Mhm.
overall, you can see the difference between Western thinking and Eastern thinking, and so, um, a lot of times when you travel, you just put yourself on the backdrop of, you know, sort of in the background, and they're in the foreground, right? And so people from independent cultures, individualistic cultures, we're not used to that.
Mhm.
We're used to being like, I'm on the spotlight. I'm on the
Mhm.
spotlight. But it works for me because I'm introverted. My husband's introverted. So yeah, it's the truth. I can put on a great extrovert show, but I get my best rest when I'm by myself. I recharge
Okay.
when I'm on my own, and I can think, and I can, write, and I can, focus a bit more. Um, I would say you're a little bit more extroverted.
I'm in the middle.
You're somewhere in the middle.
I'm in the middle because sometimes, I don't want to be bothered, and sometimes I want to be around. But that has happened since COVID.
Okay.
The that introvert part, because let's face it, I don't want to get that stuff again. So
I
I'm
hear that.
very careful about
Ooh.
where I go and who I associate with.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's the introverted start coming because of COVID, not by choice, but because of I just don't want to catch it again. I had it one time, and it's like, not doing
Where
that again.
where did you pass most of the COVID years?
Where in this house in Austin,
In
Texas?
Austin. Okay, that's what I thought. That's what I thought.
We moved. You were there when we moved back from California to Texas. Yeah.
You were in California for a few years though.
We were there
Seem
for
seem
three
like.
years. We were
Yeah.
there for 3 years, and then just like you, it's like, okay, the parents are old. What are we gonna do? We're gonna stay in California, or are we gonna come back to Texas where the family is? So we made that choice to come back to Texas where the family is, and he works from home. So still works for an office in California, but working from home.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, we spent the entire time in Hawaii. And
Hmm.
I know we know from, just those reading in the newspaper and listening to the radio shows and all that, that the response to that was very different in different parts of the
Hmm.
world, right? Like everyone kind of had their own rollout of like how it was going to go down and how things happened. So it's just very, very different experiences.
Texas never really had. We never really fully shut down. We maybe for 2 weeks, and
Oh,
then it was like everybody was out again, like nothing was happening. And it's but that's I don't get real political, but that's who was in office at the time.
okay.
The
Okay.
so-called president at the time. I'm gonna leave it at that.
Well, I do know that at the time in Hawaii, we had all kinds of things going on. But again, that collective culture, right,
Hmm.
kind of brought everybody, even though people had different ideas, and different opinions.
Hmm.
And it was kind of like, okay, we still got to take care of everybody. No
Right.
matter what you're thinking and what you're doing, you stay home. Like it was like, it's great that you have these ideas and all, and you're staying home. It just, like it was just very
Right.
interesting. Like it was kind of like first everybody's opinions was getting out there, and then all of a sudden it was like, okay, you quiet down, let's quiet down
Hmm.
and take care of each other and just
Right.
kind of hang in there and see what happens, especially that first 3 to 6 months,
Hmm.
almost a year. There was a real shift in a focus on the collective idea, right?
Hmm.
um, you still had your own voice, but you needed to be part of the group on this one. It was a group project.
Hmm.
And we all needed to contribute to that group project. So
Right.
it's a little bit different.
And
But
I
those
think
are
that's
some
good.
interesting times.
I think that is good because people here, I still wear my mask. I'm gonna tell you
Mm.
straight up. I go to the store, the mask is on. If I go anywhere in public, the mask is on. And I get looks. I was threatened. Somebody wanted to beat me up because I
Mm.
had my mask on.
Mm.
And this was still when COVID was still really out there. I mean, he's still out there.
Right.
But this heavy set white guy wanted to beat me up in Target because I had a mask on.
Mm.
And this woman stepped in. She had her mask on, and we were like, "No, that's not going down here." And he backed off. But you know, that's
Mm-hmm.
Texas. That's
Mm-hmm.
the attitude in this in Texas. And it's seen as a it's not even a political thing. It's like I want to stay safe and I want my elderly parents to be safe. It's not about me. It's about keeping myself straight and keeping my elderly parents uh, safe. My parents are fully vaccinated, but we're not even going to go into all that. It's a whole nother subject. We're talking about you today.
We're
Uh,
trying to get through the timeline.
so we're not even
Going
talking
through the
about that.
timeline.
So now you living in Ecuador.
Right. So we came, kind of Ecuador got on our map about a year or so ago, when my husband was dealing with a health issue, and
Hmm.
he had a little more time to think about, where do we want to end up in the world? Like, what is it? We both like traveling. We both like living
Hmm.
abroad. Where can we be of service? What can we do to make a difference in the world? And
Hmm.
when you look at that long scale of your life, if you look at how our folks are still living, we might,
Hmm.
if we're lucky, live to be in our 70s, 80s, 90s, right?
Hmm.
Because we have family members that live that long, and if we stay healthy, we have another 40, 50 years
Hmm.
on that scale. And so we really began to think about, like, where is it that we want to be? Where could our resources be used best, right? And so Ecuador just popped up, and he started talking to me about it. He loves learning languages, and he had never been to South America before. And since I've known him these 12 years, he'd never mentioned it. Had never
Hmm.
mentioned as a possible for a visit, right? We talked about, Asian countries. We've talked about European. We've talked about, even going up to Iceland, or, pick a place in the world and drop a pin in it, like, let's go see what we can learn and what we can contribute. And so I was really surprised. And after he was starting to feel a bit better, right around, spring of this year, we realized we needed to move from Hawaii.
Hmm.
And we were going to come to the continent. And, but where would we live? Like,
Hmm.
did we have family in California and Texas? We have folks, all across these states. We've got family in Mexico and Costa Rica and Guatemala and Honduras and all these places. Um, and so, what to do, right? So
Hmm.
we just began to investigate that further, and decided to spend the summer in Ecuador. He can work
Hmm.
remotely. So that's another whole nother topic, like what happens when you work
Hmm.
remotely. And now this
Right.
whole push for, like, the 4-day work week, or, like, just let folks work remotely, let them work from wherever, as long as their position allows for that.
Hmm.
One of the things I've been reading about is how remote work could actually help the environment, right? Because a
Hmm.
company doesn't need to keep an office.
Right.
They don't need to keep an extra refrigerator. They don't need to keep an AC on. They don't have to use electricity. They just pass those benefits on to their employees, rather than,
Hmm.
pay the electric bill. They can help out a little bit more, like in a person's salary, to pay their bills.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So um, this was not available to him before, because this was an office based position. But with COVID, everything shifted.
Hmm.
Like, they all found out, like, oh, we can work from home. Okay. It seems to
Hmm.
be working for us. So they kept it that way. There's a couple of people that go in because they prefer that, they have that option, but most of them stay home and do their work
Right.
from home. But we picked Ecuador, and we couldn't have been happier. I highly recommend it if you find yourself itching to go to South America. It's high up in the Andes, so you do have some elevation. Got to get
Hmm.
used to being at, 7,000 feet, 8,000 feet, 9,000 feet. Um, Clear blue skies. beautiful, landscapes, probably some of the most amazing food I've ever tasted anywhere. It's so good. Everything's really fresh. And the people are amazing. Just very, very
Hmm.
dear, very friendly. Folks are busy. People are working, living life, taking care of kids, but they have so many open parks, and you can just walk through the parks and enjoy the parks. They have reserves, they have museums, they have whatever you can imagine,
Hmm.
and they celebrate the indigenous people. They bring the indigenous people forward, into conversations or into spaces where their voices can be heard, and into spaces where decisions are being made. And nowhere is perfect, right? Every country has social issues that they're dealing with, and some are just in different scales. You know, um, they're feeling intensity right now because they're having their elections coming up. But I think at the overall, the main feeling here is very common is tranquilo. It's very tranquil. People
Hmm.
like to be calm. That's like they enjoy being calm. When they
Hmm.
converse, they enjoy being kind of relaxed and gentle with each other. It's not considered impolite if you're like kind of excited or like asking questions or whatever. But like they'll start everything from that neutral place, right?
Hmm.
Very natural, very comfortable. Maybe ask a few questions, maybe talk a bit. They don't mind that we're learning Spanish and we're not so good at it. Like they'll
Right.
help us with that. But that's just one example of trying when you want to think about travel. Think, do your research, pick a place, learn a little bit about it, and just go. Plan ahead. And we were able to get really, really discounted fares.
Hmm.
Um, and if you do that, it makes it so much more worth it. And the cost of living here is much lower. Daily life cost of we had lunch for $3 and had very nice tamales, handmade
Look,
from.
look, look, but there goes my face. Okay, let me stop. Look, let me look.
You can do it. You can do it. It's okay. I
Go
love
ahead.
it. It's so true though. And like we bought some very nice fresh baked bread and each piece
Hmm.
was 80 cents. You know.
I mean, I spent like 100. I, I can't find my receipt. It's like $170 something at the grocery store for, I don't know, like 2, 3 bags yesterday.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
exactly. Exactly.
so you killing me. You killing me with these
It's
prices.
all out of scale.
Mm,
We were I don't know if you would call this climate like travel, but it's the way things are changing in the world is affecting people's lives, right? So
mm-hmm,
the temperatures have increased worldwide. And we've seen it with wildfires even from years and years ago. Not to mention present day. We're seeing these increase. And so up here in the mountains, there's different changes that take place.
mm-hmm,
But because its elevation is so high and the cost of living is so low, there's actually people moving here from different parts of the world to retire. So they're taking
mm-hmm,
what they've earned in their livelihoods and putting it to good use here. And the folks here are welcoming of that because people who come generally adopt the local culture. They make an
mm-hmm,
effort to learn Spanish. They make an effort to learn the history. They make an effort to immerse themselves in this beautiful environment and take care of it, plant trees and all. So um, we're in the city of Cuenca at the moment, and it's really home to a very large population of people who are in their retirement years
mm-hmm,
from all over the world, and it's great for them because they don't have to worry about some of the things they're facing back in their home country, but then they also really enjoy the lifestyle here, and
mm-hmm,
they enjoy being out and about, or they enjoy, the libraries, the culture, the, arts, everything that's available to them. We met one couple from Canada, and they do Tai Chi in the park 3 days a
wow,
week,
that's
and
nice.
they're learning from an Ecuadorian man who happens to be a teacher of that,
Mm-hmm.
so it's available to them. So they were like, oh, we're going to be a part of that. And boy, they just love it. They're just really enjoying it. And he was sharing with me that they got squeezed out kind of like at the tail end of the baby boomers. So they
Mm-hmm.
were their pension back in Canada, you would think would be substantial, but it was getting
Mm-hmm.
smaller and smaller.
Oh
And they were
wow.
realizing like we're not going to be hireable in a few years. So they actually
Mm-hmm.
retired early, a little bit early for Canada, and came down here, and they've never left, and they enjoy it so much. They go visit family, of course, and their family
Mm-hmm.
comes and sees them. But they just felt like it makes so much more sense, for the lifestyle that they want to live, that if they live
Mm-hmm.
abroad. So that's an
So we're
option.
gonna move on to something else. We're gonna
Okay.
talk about this interview, the service berry, an economy of abundance by Robin Wall. I think it's Kimmerr.
Mm-hmm.
Did I spell her say her last name correctly?
I think so. I think
Okay.
so. Yeah.
So Ruhi sent me a recording. It's an audio recording, and this lady is Native American, indigenous, and the interview she uses uh, berries, but it's not really about it is about berries, but it isn't about berries.
Mm.
It's just something that she uses to bring us in to the conversation about how we think about resources, natural resources, and how um, because the service berry itself provides food for animals and people, and it's I think it's a shrub. I think it's like a tree type of shrub
Mm-hmm.
situation. But I found this interview or this recording to be really interesting because she talks about how society, the economy, the Western economy comes for lack, and
Mm.
how uh, our whole society is based on lack and not. Um, and so that's why we're always trying to grab the resources, and how we're always taking and taking, and how if you look at the service berry, how it provides for not just people but animals and birds and insects. How you look at these berries and how we should function as society from gratitude and reciprocity. You know. So let's talk a little bit about that. I'm just giving a brief. That's just my brief understanding.
That was awesome. And cut.
It's a filmmaker in me. Cut. Okay. So I just this is just a little tidbit of what I wrote down. So let's go ahead and let you talk about that.
Well, the reason I was thinking about that, Jenny and I keep in touch from time to time. We check in with each other. We've even tried collaborating on projects, and we have a couple things that we want to finish, and maybe a few we want to start, as we were talking about already. But right now, I'm in the sort of in between. I had finished my undergraduate degree years and years ago, and then all my life, I've really been interested in ethnography, right? I'm interested in telling the story about people, particularly indigenous people, but more so indigenous people and the intersection between what happens when, in social science, a person that you're interviewing becomes the first person account rather than a third person account. So a lot of times you see that in social science, like there's an anthropologist sort of observing and like making notes and taking down, details and so on, and typing
Hmm.
on the computer or using a notepad or a camera. And I was just thinking to myself, what happens if somebody wants to tell a story, but they want to use the tool of a camera on their own, and
Hmm.
then you help them use that camera to tell the story. And then that becomes part of the documentation of the study. This is very
Mhm.
unusual. Usually it's a third person, like you do your thing and your family and all that, and I'll watch you.
Mhm.
But if they tell their own story, it might be that much more powerful. So that's a little background on where we're headed. But I decided to take some classes so that I could get ready for graduate school because I've been out of school for so long. I have like, no clue
Mhm.
what's going on in terms of, the research, what folks are doing, how they're thinking. And at the same time, I wanted to level up my own skill set in social transformation. And so that's why I started taking these courses. It's a social transformation certificate through the Wilmette Institute, and they're available worldwide. Like folks can do, there's all sorts of programs out there. There's all sorts of excellent opportunities. These particular courses are related to how we see the world through the Baha'i perspective. And the
Mhm.
Baha'i faith is a worldwide religion, but from this vantage point is looking at human prosperity and sustainability with the lens of the oneness of humanity. So this idea, the central purpose or the central principle is that we're all one human family. So when you start
Mhm.
to come to it from that perspective, all these challenges and difficulties that we're facing, like this woman who's telling the story of the serviceberry, she herself is a scientist, right? She's an ecologist.
Mhm.
She is also a native person and walks through the land that she was raised on, and other parts of that continent as well, and can see things, right, and observe things in a totally different light. That's very
Mhm.
interesting to me. And one of the course objectives that we're supposed to do is have a conversation around some of the themes that are related to this study. Inside of this one particular article, which is a podcast read by herself because she did write a book called Braiding Sweetgrass,
Mhm.
is that her observation is that it's possible to have an economy of abundance
Mhm.
rather than, as you mentioned, economy of lack or economy of
Mhm.
scarcity, right?
Mhm.
And current capitalistic methodology is make it scarce, make it a little
Right.
bit of expensive, and make it so that there's lots of toll booths along the way, right? So there's this supply chain, right? And by the time it gets to the consumer, it's a certain price. But through marketing and other means, you made the human being feel like they need this thing. And then
Mhm.
they purchase it, right? So she was contrasting this sort of like linear economy, they call it, with an economy of the serviceberry. So that's
Mhm.
where she gave the example. Um, Here we have this beautiful berry that's so abundant that I can eat off of it. The birds can come, other
Mhm.
animals can come. Those animals feed other animals. Those resources, we call it, are not really resources. They're actually
Mhm.
gifts, and that's what she was talking about. Is sort of
Right.
this gift economy. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you. I'm just it's happened to me, but like when I've been given a gift of like, you know, fruits or homegrown vegetables or something like that, it feels different than
Mhm.
if when you
You had
receive
gone to the
it.
store, right?
Have you had that experience where someone was like, here's some stuff I've grown or I've cared for or I made by hand, whatever the thing is, right? They're an artist and they make it by hand, they paint it by hand, they do something
Mhm.
to where like it's a gift. It's not something that it's a commodity. It's not for sale
Right.
in that sense. So she was really relating it to that, and she gave this beautiful example to try to help the listener understand a bit more. There was a linguist who was studying a group of people in the rainforest. And
Mhm.
on that particular day, the hunters come back and they've had a nice hunt, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And they've got a bunch of meat. And so as a good anthropologist or a linguist, they're learning new words and they're taking notes and going, wow, they came back with he was curious, Well, now that you have this, because we have the ability to preserve meat, there are natural ways that you can take care of the meat and
Mhm.
store it away. He asked, how will you store this meat?
The meat.
And
Right. Mhm.
And the indigenous person, the local person was so like, what, store the meat. Okay. What do you mean by that? It's like, well, you have all this excess. You have a lot of abundance here,
Mhm.
and it was just still kind of like, I don't know what exactly that means, but the best way he could describe it was he was going to give an invitation to the whole community and invite
Mhm.
all of the families to come and partake in this hunt, right? Bringing back the meat to his family and then feed everyone. And so he basically told the anthropologist, he said, I store the meat in the belly of my
Mhm.
brother.
Right.
And this is a shift in thinking for this person, because he was like, what? you know, Being Western minded. Um, and store, okay. And even the ecologist, Robin, was found that to be very instructive to her. As someone who's indigenous she was like, I see, I understand, you know, like you would never think to just hide it away for yourself when times are scarce, because as a person who is indigenous, you live in abundance, right? Your mindset
Mhm.
is abundant. And sometimes you can't find a thing, but most of the time you can, right? Like
Mhm.
there might come a day where you come back and there's no meat.
Mhm.
But that's all
Right.
right, because there are other things. And so that's
And
really
then
what
also
she was
the
talking about.
and then also when you help people, if you have your hand closed in a fist,
Mhm.
nothing comes in because it's closed. It's tight. Nothing's coming in. But you open your hand and you give from that hand, you're gonna get back. It's gonna come back to that hand. That's all I'm saying.
Well, that's what's interesting, is because she's walking through, this space, and she's
Mhm.
seeing the trees and the ground cover and the
Mhm.
flowers and the birds and the other wildlife. And to her, it's
Mhm.
kind of like it has a spiritual component to it.
Mhm.
It's
It's
not just,
symbiotic. It's
yes.
symbiotic because everybody's gaining from that. Even the tree itself, because without the insects and the birds, it wouldn't grow. It would die because the insects
Mhm.
and the birds help pollinate it, so it would die.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the take home message that she was trying to get across is she was so humble. Yeah, she was like, I'm an ecologist. Last time I studied economics was high school." So she
Mhm.
went around and asked. Turned out one of her relatives was a high school economics teacher, and so that person
Mhm.
was saying, well, it's the study of scarcity. And then she's
Mhm.
like, well, I'll ask my economics friend who's a professor at the university, like, what is economics? And she's like, it's the study of scarcity. And she said, well, I'm just curious. She asked other professionals, would it be possible if the natural world could be an economic model, right? Is it possible to think of it that way? And they were like, yes, you can think of it that way, because there's an
Mhm.
exchange. There's this constant exchange. And she was really pleased to see that a lot of folks, particularly this one economics friend of hers, was so happy that she asked that question, because she said that's kind of where we're headed, right?
Mhm.
We're realizing with all these changes in the climate, with all these changes in the natural world, that human beings are not separate from the world.
Mhm.
They're actually very much a part of the world. You hear this kind of conversation sometimes, that the world would be better with no humans. Well, the fact of
Mhm.
the matter is that we're here because we
Mhm.
belong here, right?
Mhm.
We're here because we fit into this world, and we have a role to play just as much as any of the creatures in the world, microscopic, invisible, all the way to the largest one you can find.
Mhm.
There is a particular reason that they're part of that ecosystem. And
Mhm.
so that includes human beings, and you can't separate humankind from nature. We are organic with it, right? We are
Mhm.
part of it. And we also have a life cycle, right? Just as any living thing has a life cycle. And one of the challenges humanity has had, and you see this no matter where you travel in the world, you can have this same conversation, because people can see this in their own community too. That in the old days, long time ago, people used to think that the world was dead, the earth
Mhm.
itself was inert, that it had no
Right.
living organism in it. It's just living things lived on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they didn't think that trees talked to each other, communicated in the root systems. They didn't
Mm-hmm.
think that there was any relationship between the ocean and the land. They didn't think, they just didn't know. Either that
Mm-hmm.
or they didn't want to think of it that way. And unfortunately, that had a huge impact on humankind, that kind of thought. Because what happens when you think the earth is dead, you start to feel more superior towards it. And then you can look around you in your own kind, your own species, and you can say, well, if the earth is dead, then it's okay if I bother my brother over here because they're less than me, so I can
Mm-hmm.
trouble them, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that began a whole conversation or a whole philosophy around that's a
That's a
time, that's
whole
a
nother
conversation for
subject.
another
That's a
day.
whole nother
But that
conversation.
but that's what
Right.
happens when you start to separate humanity from the natural world, is it gives
Mm-hmm.
people permission
Mm-hmm.
to, oh, I can extract, I can
Mm-hmm.
make something, I can waste it because it doesn't matter, what happens
Mm-hmm.
to my brother or sister, right? I'm just taking care of
Mm-hmm.
what I got to take care of right here, you know. So those are steps that humankind took. Now, fast forward to this conversation where she was focusing on this idea of abundance. She could
Mm-hmm.
basically make a model that like let people see how reciprocity
Mm-hmm.
helps communities come together, right? So she
Mm-hmm.
was really diving into um, that element. She gave that beautiful example of her neighbor who has a small like community farm.
Farm and yeah, they
It's
all
like,
came in. Yeah,
yeah,
that was really good.
they got a chance to come pick berries, and she was like, wait a minute, they have bills to pay, but they're opening
Mm-hmm.
up their farm to folks to come pick berries.
Mm-hmm.
And what's all that about? And so she asked the farmer, and the farmer said, well, it's true. Part of our earnings and what we do here involves selling the berries, but they're so abundant that
Mm-hmm.
we just want to give joy. We
Mm-hmm.
want to invite families to come down and just pick the berries and enjoy them,
Mm-hmm.
and take that home as a memory, and take that home as a way to show that they had time together,
Mm-hmm.
that they celebrated one another. And so she was really doing well to give these example after example.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we reflect on our own lives, we can think of examples where we've done that, in our families or in our neighborhoods or communities. It's just that we don't talk about it much, right? We kind
Right.
of, people are like, that's my core memory.
Right.
That was awesome time we had. I mean, I don't know. Did you guys have a chance to go out on the farm when you all had your family reunion?
We were on the farm.
You were
It
on
was incredible.
the farm. Oh,
I have
cool.
never, I have never experienced anything like that. It was, I mean, people we didn't even know were walking up to us. You need some help. You need this. You need that. I mean, it was just,
Wow.
it just, and I'm gonna take it to another level. It was primarily black, and that really made me feel a lot of pride that a lot of people say black people can't get together and get along, and that's a
Mm,
lie. We can't get together and we can't get along and we can't help each other because a whole weekend there was food. We didn't even have to think about food. It was
that's
like we had
beautiful.
we had breakfast, we had lunch, we had dinner, and everybody was coming together, bringing food. I have this, let's put this on the grill. Well, I have this, I have this, I have this, I have this. What do you need? You need some help? Sister, do you need some help? You know, you need some water, you need this. I mean, everybody was just, it was a family. It was not, it was everybody. It was like there were 300 people on my cousin's farm.
Beautiful.
He has
Wow.
61 acres in Missouri, and it's like I said, people I didn't even know. I mean, it was just like a wonderful just gathering and different types of people because my cousin belongs to a motorcycle group, a Christian motorcycle group. They came. The Marine Corps, people from the Marine Corps came. People from the Army came. People from
Wow.
the Air Force came. Just all walks of life. And it was just like, it was something I want to experience again, and I want to go again next year because they've been doing it every year, and every year it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're just out on the land, and everybody's sharing, everybody's eating. There was a live band that came in. We had
Wow.
music. We had fireworks. We had a bonfire, and the kids were playing in the pool. He has a pool on his property. The kids were all in the pool, ATVing. It was black magic.
Yes. Yes.
It was community, and the
Mm.
people from the adjoining farms, some of the neighbors came, and they were white and nobody cared. I mean, they came over, they came over with their kids, and they were in the pool. Everybody was just it was a gathering of different people, different races, just a gathering.
Beautiful.
It was
I
a
love
lovely
that.
time. hmm
It
It was
sounds
just
like
lovely.
the gift economy was alive and well there. The
It
abundance,
was very much alive and
sharing.
well.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was sharing. I mean, it was just sitting on the ground. It's like, hey, are we hippies? You know, just sitting on the ground, eating underneath the tree. We just, everybody was just
It's
here.
beautiful.
Music was playing. It was just eating, sitting on the ground, sitting on the ground, just eating. Just, here, 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 here. hmm
Enjoying each other.
It was. So
Perfect. That's
yes,
so
I
perfect.
I experienced that. I experienced that during COVID.
Mm.
I've experienced that when we had the snowstorm here, and we ran out of water, and I called to cancel my doctor's appointment, and the lady said, "Do you need something?" I said, "Yes, my 100-year-old grandmother is here, and we don't have any water." And she said,
Mm.
"I'm coming after work, and I'm gonna bring you some water." And my mom said, and she said, "You need anything, any food? You warm? It's like, yeah, we got heat. We just don't have any water." And she came and she bought us a big case of water and some eggs. And the
Wow.
woman didn't even know me. I just called to cancel my doctor's appointment because it was snowing. So yeah, I experienced that,
How did you
and
feel?
I felt grateful because it wasn't just me. My grandmother my
Mm-hmm.
grandma's gone now, but she was 100 years old, and I didn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's like my husband and my aunt went out. My mom, my aunt, and my grandmother. My husband and my aunt went out and got some ice because there's no water. Got big packets of ice, and this stranger, this woman, I didn't even know, just said, "I'll meet you after work." She drove all the way from Elgin. That's a long way, about an hour away, to
Mm-hmm.
bring us eggs and a pack of water. So my grandmother, see, I'm getting choked up. So my grandmother, my 100-something-year-old grandmother, would have water. So I'm getting like, somebody I don't know. I didn't even know this person. And I do stuff here and there, but I don't like to talk about it. I mean, I give water to the homeless whenever I can because it's hot. It's 105-degree
So
heat
true.
here.
Yes.
I don't like to talk about it because you're not supposed to talk about when you give. You're supposed to give
Mm.
and not let people know. But when I can, I'm just one person, but I do what I can. I go to the store, I get some water, take it down to the church, and the homeless people lined up every day at noon, and I give them water because
Mm.
it's hot. This is Texas. We're boiling, and I give them water. But I don't really like to talk about that too much because then it's like I'm trying to get praise from other people, and you shouldn't. What you do should be in your left. Let's see. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. So I don't
Mm.
really talk too much about uh, the volunteer work that I do because I don't want my praise, or I don't want that coming from a person. I want it to come from God. My blessing comes from
Right.
God, not from another person. But I do stuff here and there, best I
Mm-hmm.
can do. I'm only one person, but I do what I can.
I think that those things have a huge impact. And I think it starts with a place of that connection between like the creator and the created, right? There's that
Hmm.
bond and that bond of love. And it's really that love that it comes from that source, right? So
Hmm.
we're just trying our best to share that love. And the more we can expand on it, right? Your family reunion is a beautiful example of how it's just been expanding and expanding, expanding over the
Hmm.
years, right? And so it just keeps growing and growing and growing until the word got out to 300 people. get
300
everybody
people.
get everybody together. And I
Hmm.
think that's awesome. And I
People
do
were
think that.
camping out in
Oh,
tents.
good. Oh, wonderful.
They had tents. We had an RV. There was RV city, and then there was tent city.
Mm-hmm.
And we had an RV, but
You guys made cities. I love
yeah, it was a city. I mean, it was an RV city, and then there was people in tents, but we were all together. The people in tents,
it.
RV, whatever. All of us were together and just sharing, and
Yeah.
enjoying nature and enjoying the outdoors and fishing. My cousin had a pond. People were fishing. I mean, it was just like I told this one lady. She said, "How you doing? How y'all doing?" And I said, "I'm fine." She said, "You
I
doing
love it.
all right?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "It's all love." She said, "It is. It is all love. I'm gonna put that on a
Oh.
t-shirt next year. Next time we have this, I'm coming back next year. You coming back?" I said, "Yeah. I'm gonna put that on a t-shirt. It's all love. That's all right. I like that."
Hey, anybody watching, if you surf around Janine's channel, you will find everything. You will find poetry, you will find acting, you will find storytelling, you're gonna find comedy, you're gonna find, she puts it all out there. I highly recommend cruising her channel and checking out all the great interviews and everything. And oh man, just the other day, you're like, I'm coming to visit you. We're going to go to the reservation. We're going to meet new
We are.
people. Hey, I'm excited. That's one of the next things that's coming up for us is we're moving to Tulsa. And that sort of came about. Maybe folks don't know this, maybe you do, but there are cities in North America that will pay you to move there. So they are more than happy to offer incentives when communities are getting a little bit smaller or they want to bring in like a new sector, whether it's education or tech, or they're interested in expanding on regenerative agricultural practices. They attract different professionals in different fields to come to that area of the world, and they'll give you some incentives to move there. And so my husband got accepted to one of those programs. And so we're made a year commitment to live in Tulsa. And we're
Hmm.
super excited about that. Not too far from Texas. That's the
Yay!
thrill. We can actually spend time together. We can actually see each other and not
Yay!
not miss each other.
So let's go back.
Okay.
You have people and friends in Hawaii, and we
Yes.
all know about the horrible, horrific fire. How is it going for the people that you know?
Hawaii is a small nation, and I say nation because historically, it was the monarchy was overthrown by American missionary descendants, and this is history that was little known for over 100 years, even to the people themselves, the indigenous people
Hmm.
themselves. I met people living there almost 10 years that didn't find out until high school that they had a rich heritage. They had
Hmm.
their own language. They had their own culture. And it was almost to the point of erasure. And
Hmm.
that's something that happens worldwide. And so that community is very tight. People know each other. There are a lot of family members on different islands. Um, and we know from just the changes in the climate and other things we've seen over the last 10, 20 years that these things are increasing. And one of the challenges in Hawaii or Pacific nations or areas of the world that are close to water is you'd be dealing with some hurricanes on a seasonal basis. These things have increased as well over the years. And in Maui specifically, due to colonization and also the transference of native plants into invasive species, all the way through to certain regions of Maui on the west side becoming sugarcane fields or pineapple fields, and this type of farming that is not appropriate and is basically industrialized. It's not healthy for the land
Mhm.
itself in many parts of the world. An area of Maui which was once a wetland, abundant water. A lot of the names of places on Maui have the word vai in front of it. It means water. So it's like
Mhm.
the recognition of the language even is like there's water here. This water
Mhm.
place, that water place, this place of water, right? So it's kind of like some of the challenges that you're seeing today are man-made, man-made from hundreds and hundreds of years ago, decisions that people made to take over and
Mhm.
replace or erase indigenous wisdom with their own thoughts and ideas. And the fire itself, of course, is absolutely tragic. The devastation is not, this won't be the last time, right? Because we
Mm.
see fires happening all around the Mediterranean, the circle of the Mediterranean. There's fires happening all over Europe. There's fires happening we saw years ago in Australia. Back before
Mm.
COVID,
Yes.
everyone was like, I hope
Mhm.
this is the worst thing that happens this year, 2020. We're like, oh,
Right.
yeah, not the worst thing, but also
Right.
terrible, right?
Right.
So we're going to continue to see this as long as humankind is out of balance with the natural world, right? And so a
Mhm.
lot of the systems that are in place right now are continuing to extract. And many human beings are asking, how long can we do this, right? So these questions are being asked. And when the fire started, it's not unusual to have a fire here or there, but it will be put out pretty quick. What
Mhm.
happened on Maui is those 80 per hour mile winds from the hurricane
Mhm.
passing by lifted up those embers, and then it just kept catching fire faster and faster. And you've probably seen reports where it traveled a mile a minute, right?
Wow.
It was
Wow.
not, it was cyclones, little mini fire cyclones were happening. And people can't run that fast, right?
Mm.
People cannot move quickly enough. A car would have a tough time
Mhm.
trying to get away from there. And that's what you see today. Now, I just decided because I've had the privilege of hearing firsthand from Native people the stories of these islands in many different spaces, I was curious. And I remember stories of Maui on the west side being shared with me probably about 8 or 9 years ago. And I thought, I'm just going to look at the map and see where are these wetlands,
Mhm.
and they are literally right there. Ancient wetlands are literally right there. So much water would come down that there was like a tube underneath the
Mhm.
island. Spring water would rush under it and come out in these open springs and be like fish ponds,
Mhm.
right? And then there was these valleys. You can still see the valleys on the map of Maui, just water pouring into that area where it's almost like a marshland or wetland.
Mhm.
And that was the ancient seat of Kamehameha. So the entire royal family, the chiefs and they call ali'i of the communities of these islands resided there. So
Mhm.
there's lots of impact happening, not only at the level of what you see on the surface, right? But those ancient grounds, so sacred sites as well as burial places, were covered as time went on and are now present day parking lots and baseball fields. So
Mm.
an archaeological dig could bring out all the structures from underneath. They
Mhm.
could also bring out some of the learning and also many cultural practitioners who have been focused on this place. It's a tiny little island within that little marshland called Moku'ula, and essentially
Mhm.
it was the center of all activity throughout Maui and the islands, right? So you had I'll send you some of the illustrations I've collected. But yeah, living in that community, we sort of saw ourselves as guests the entire time.
Mhm.
because we're not born and raised there, right? So we
Mhm.
did everything we could to immerse ourselves, right, in the culture, but also give back because the land itself is so abundant. You were
Mhm.
constantly presented with aloha, right? This idea of love. You were constantly presented with welcome. You were constantly presented with invitation, you know, and
Mhm.
friendship. And I the islands of Molokai is the only place I've ever been in the world where when I see people that we know there, they say welcome home. And that's
Mhm.
amazing to me when I'm not born there, right? I'm not
Mhm.
Hawaiian. I'm not raised there. I'm learning the language, but I don't have a mastery of the language. Um,
Mhm.
but that's how that whole spirit, you'll see it on the news broadcasts. People are just coming together, right? And so the
Mhm.
folks that first responded were coming by boat because they knew they couldn't get
Mhm.
in by roadways. They were arriving on the shore. They were very, very careful because there was debris. They realized
Mhm.
there may be people's loved ones, even camped on the seaside or even have passed on in the water. So they were very, very careful coming up, but they knew they had to get these supplies in, right? So they
Mhm.
just started. They did everything they could to just start the process. Um, but I'm blessed in another way is through Facebook and other means have made friends over the years. I get to read the current thoughts and feelings of people that I hold dear, and that I love.
Mhm.
We do have friends who've lost their homes, and they're
Mm.
looking for loved ones, because again the community is small, right? So even when I
Right.
watch the news, I'm like, I know that person. I've seen that person at a
Wow.
workshop, or oh my god, I took a class with this person, or oh my goodness, that that's Auntie so and so. You know what I mean? Like it's that small of a community, island wide. Even though you don't
Mhm.
see each other if you live on different islands all the time, but somewhere your path is going to cross sometime. And so it's really been really devastating for a lot of people.
Mhm.
But the recognition and the clarity around how this happened has a lot to do with things and decisions that were made hundreds of years ago. And
Mhm.
just not addressing the concerns of Native people. They've been, water is life, right? The whole movement
Mhm.
around Indigenous people worldwide trying to get water back into the places where they know it should go, because all these waterways have been diverted, all these rivers and streams and waterfalls have been diverted. And so for years, maybe decades and longer, people have been fighting for these rights.
Mhm.
And I think that's another layer, right? That's very significant if we listen to people who are familiar, that know the land and the water systems, and even made it their life's work, right? Either as a cultural
Mhm.
practitioner or as a ecologist, like the example of the we were talking about with the serviceberry, somebody who
Mhm.
loved the land so much they made it their profession, not only their culture, but they went in and studied it in a different way. Um, because it's important to understand that indigenous knowledge is scientific knowledge. It is
Mhm.
scientific knowledge. It's just another way of doing it. It's another way of seeing. It's another way of knowing the land. I mean, I've
Right.
met people, elders in Hawaii, who can name like there's something like dozens of types of wind in a certain valley, and they know
Mhm.
all the names of that kind of wind. They can tell you the
Wow.
name of a kind of wind that a certain fish will swim upstream, and that's when
Wow.
you go fish that fish. You
Mm.
don't need to look for that fish unless that certain type of wind is going up
Mhm.
the valley. The fish ain't there. Don't look. It's not going to be there unless this certain kind of wind is coming up. That's how they know. It's very
Mm.
deep and far, right? So I think the layers of devastation, it's very triggering for people because it's like we've been talking about this. We've been
Mhm.
saying these invasive species are going to light on fire when they dry out. We've been
Mhm.
saying we go out there with
Mhm.
our own hands and pick and pull because we know that's not safe, right? But
Mhm.
they had not enough hands in the end.
Right.
So there's a lot of community work, a lot of layers. I think the important thing though is a lot of people are saying right now is that the hearts are really tender, you know.
Mhm.
There's a lot of sorrow. And so you don't want to be putting that kind of heavy pressure on families right now. You know,
Mhm.
they need to get there, they need shelter, they need water
Mhm.
and food, they need to know where their family members are. And if their family members have passed, then they need time to grieve and they need to go
Mhm.
through that process. And yes, there will be rebuilding, right? But it may not look like what's there now. A
Mhm.
lot of local folks don't like the fact that it was all tourism, you know,
Right.
across Hawaii.
Right.
Not just that area, but just
Right.
across the nation itself. Um, Other people, they like a blend. They like a little bit of tourism and then a little bit of you can go home.
Mhm.
And then other people are like, yes, please come and stay. You know, everyone has
Mhm.
different understanding and different ways of thinking.
Mhm.
Um, but I've seen people post that now's not the time to have the
Right.
conversation around
Mhm.
certain things. But that's really for them to decide, right? I don't get into
Right.
those conversations. I listen. That's my role
Mhm.
is, you know, as a friend to walk with or accompany. But it's not my role at all
Mhm.
as a visitor or as a settler, they call it, or as somebody who's a guest to insist
Mhm.
on my understanding because they're the ones that have to raise that up, you know,
Mhm.
when the time comes. And there's a lot of anger. Yeah, you'll see
I
that
bet.
people are
I'm
very
sure. I'm
frustrated
sure.
and um but I mean it's like we talked about earlier, a lot of that same situation in Katrina, right? When you
Mhm.
had this devastation, people are coming in, you know,
Taking, yeah, taking
swooping
advantage
in.
and taking their land and right.
Yeah. So I think
Definitely.
thank you for asking about them. I think it's important that we part of it is just seeing the history for what it is and
Mhm.
sitting with that, right? No matter
Mhm.
our background, sit with that and be like, okay, this happened, and now we gotta be respectful, you know,
Mhm.
and help wherever we can, whatever that looks like. And so for some people, it will be on the ground, right, doing the daily
Mhm.
work, and for other people, it'll be, you know, staying in prayer. And for others, it's going to be, you know, a conversation they'll have with their classroom, you know.
Mhm.
And for other people, it'll be scientists who are kind of looking at like where do we go from here. Um, it's going to be really different for each person, but that balance between how humankind is so related to the natural world. We are part of the natural world, and in Hawaiian worldview, they value uh, plants, as a good example. They're family members. They have a origin or a creation myth or stories around how they came into the world that they're so
Mhm.
connected to the plant of taro, it's called, or kalo.
Mhm.
They're born from that plant, right? So there's not it's not like we're also separate. They have the human beings are human beings and plants are plants, but in the telling of stories, we have to begin to see the deeper meaning, right? When an indigenous person says, "The turtle is my grandmother," listen,
Mhm.
you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, how did that? Okay, tell me more. How did that happen? Or,
Mhm.
you know, I need to know, right? Because that's how we understand our relationship to the natural world. Like that's the Cherokee. That's how they understand their relationship, right? And we need to understand that relationship. So it's 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 so it has the elements of heartbreak, but inside that, there was one beautiful report, and maybe I'll close with that. Is they were interviewing those who were responsible for a collection of cultural work and archives right in Moku'ula area, right in the heart of Lahaina.
Mm-hmm.
And in ancient times, Lahaina had a different name, but often went by Lele. And this man is dedicated, he's Hawaiian, dedicated 50 years of his life to educating the community and bringing up Hawaiians and traveling the world on the, on the canoe, and like bringing back these relics and making carvings and telling stories. And they kept his whole collection there. He's already retired. Thankfully, he survived the fires, but his collection didn't. And so this woman who was the responsible for this collection, she had the job of calling him the next day to tell him that this collection did not survive. And he was very quiet, and of course remorseful and sad. And she was as well. And they ended their conversation by saying, "Let's talk more tomorrow." And he called back the next day. And I think I shared this with you. It was so sweet, like just that gentleness on the phone. And he had a dream that his people were back in the ash planting seeds. Slowly but intentionally planting seeds. And this woman was so moved. She said, "I can't believe it. Like, that's why we have to turn to our elders and connect with our community and have these intergenerational relationships and be part of this collective," is because just with one dream, he was able to shift my thinking to a longer view, to have a wider view, a more collective view of the next generation. Yes, it's great loss, but at the same time, we have to get out there and plant those seeds again and again and again. And we do it together. It's not just him, right? It's the whole community out there planting seeds to regrow the vibrancy of that area, So it's such a beautiful, beautiful way of thinking about it. And what are those? Yeah, it comes back to that conversation, the gift, right? The gift economy. Like, if we can all understand that we have a role to play, then when we receive these gifts, we can give out when there's abundance. Yeah, definitely.
Yay! So let me turn my music back on. She went deep, guys. She got all deep on me. I was like, what? But that's Ruhi. That's how she is. And I'm really grateful to have her as my friend for all these many years.
For sure.
And Ruhi, thank you so much for being on my channel. And again, people, if you like what you saw, please subscribe, pass it on. And as always, love you. Have a beautiful day, night, wherever you are. And peace. Bye-bye.
Thank
Play
you.
us out.